What do a wooden kebab stick, a pack of paper clips, a plastic takeaway box, and an old t-shirt have in common? Well, they're all free or super cheap things that I include in my houseplant care kit to keep my houseplants healthy. That's what I'm going to be discussing in this short but sweet episode. My name is Jane Perrone and I am the host of this podcast, On the Ledge, your guide to indoor gardening. And it's been a lovely few days. I'm loving springtime. Oh, my favourite time of year. I spent last weekend at the Malvern Houseplant Festival, part of the Malvern Spring Show in the county of Worcestershire here in the UK. And I got the chance to meet some listeners, shout out in particular to Vivian and Frank, both of whom came to say hello and were absolutely delightful. I sold a few copies of my book and my set of houseplant cards and shot the breeze with lots of lovely planty people, including Worcester Terrariums, aka Ben Newell, who was delightful, and I hope to get him on the podcast soon. He was great. But without any further ado, on with the business of the show. Houseplant toolkits. What do we put in them? Now, I don't like to consider myself an influencer. I'm a bit of a de-influencer, actually, in that I'm telling you kind of not to buy stuff most of the time. You don't need all of the gubbins that people are trying to push at you for your houseplant care. It's pretty simple. There are very few things I would spend money on. I'm going to talk about two things that I would spend money on, but the other items are all things that you can get almost for free. You'll probably have them lying around your house, but they really will make a difference to your houseplant care. So I'm going to be explaining those. I know we're usually every other week, but it's a busy time of year, so I'm popping in this extra short but sweet episode for you. So without any further ado, let's get on to the list of stuff to include in your houseplant kit. And the first one is a syringe. So these are the plastic syringes that you often find in children's medicine bottles, like liquid paracetamol that you get for children, or if you've got pets, oftentimes if you've got to give them some medicine, it'll come with a little syringe. Keep hold of that syringe. It's incredibly useful for dosing up houseplant feeds, liquid houseplant feeds, which are often given in very small amounts, a few millilitres at a time. And it's important to be accurate. If you've got one of these syringes to hand, you can use it to draw up exactly the right amount of feed for your plants. It's incredibly useful. So I always keep these. Otherwise, they're just a single-use plastic that probably isn't going to get recycled. So I try to make use of them as much as I can. Next up is another single-use item that's thrown away by the millions and we all use. Yes, it's the toothbrush. So a toothbrush is a really good tool for many houseplant tasks. I love using them for mealybugs. If you have plants that you can wash down, so something like a strelitzia or a fairly hard-leaved plant that has mealybugs but isn't a cactus, then you can take it outside and wash it down. Use a toothbrush, obviously one you've finished putting in your mouth, dipped into rubbing alcohol, which is known in the UK as surgical spirit, and then applied to the nests of the mealybugs, the cottony bits that you see, and indeed all over the plant. Give it a gentle rub with your toothbrush. It will remove a lot of those pests and their eggs. It is going to be a rinse and repeat, but it's a useful tool to have around. And you can use the toothbrush dry if you are cleaning up cacti that have got dirty, cleaning small terracotta pots. Also, it's a good tool to have around. Rather than buying a special brush, just use an old toothbrush. We've all got them laying around. If you have more delicate tasks to complete which involve brushing, so for example you've got cacti and succulents that need a dust, an old clean makeup brush or an old paintbrush, also clean, work really well as well if you have one of those lying around to dislodge dust and just clean up plants that you don't necessarily want to get wet. So ones that have got furry surfaces, spines, fluffy bits and so on that might still need cleaning up. Item number 3. Again, this is something you're going to have lying around your house, and that is an old t-shirt, an old cotton t-shirt that has gone beyond the pale, probably too raggedy to give to the charity shop or thrift store. It's only fit for recycling. So here's what I do. Get a pair of scissors, cut out decent sized rags from this item, bundle up the rest and add it to the clothing recycling bag, and then take those rags, and they are perfect. That soft cotton is perfect for cleaning plant leaves. Now, yes, you can buy these special gloves that you can clean leaves with, microfiber gloves. I'd prefer to use an old t-shirt. It's free. It's available. I've always got a pile of these rags sitting around. They work really, really well. And if it happens to be a white t-shirt, you'll be able to see the dirt you're getting off your plant really well. So using this to wipe down plant leaves, just put some water onto the rag. If you live in a hard water area, so an area where there's a lot of dissolved mineral salts in the water, then it's ideal if you can use rainwater or distilled water or water from an RO, reverse osmosis system, so that you avoid getting chalky residue left on those leaves. So next time you're chucking clothes out, just make yourself a pile of these. As I say, 100% cotton is ideal. T-shirts that you've worn over and over again, they tend to be really, really soft, and they can have a whole new life helping your houseplants stay clean. What's the benefit of cleaning your plant leaves? Well, you're going to be removing the dust that might be clogging up the pores, the breathing holes, known as stomata, on your plant's leaves, helping them photosynthesize more successfully. Plus also they just look very miserable when they're dusty. It can also help with removing pests to things like spider mites and thrips, and a damp cloth will do a lot of good to plants that have these infestations, to remove those things from the leaves. And I don't know about you, but I make a big mess when I am dealing with my houseplants. So also these can be used just as mop-up rags for cleaning the floor, cleaning pots, all that good stuff. Then just bung them in the washing machine when you've finished, and they're ready to go another round. And you can keep using them until they literally fall apart. Up next, the takeaway plastic container. So if you have indulged in a cheeky takeaway at any point in the last 4 years, and even the most dedicated cook from scratch type person occasionally succumbs to pumpkin katsu or some noodles, at least you can make good use of the plastic trays that these often still come in. So lots of companies are converting to recyclable materials or compostable materials. So I try to stick to takeaway companies that have cardboard boxes that I can then put onto my compost heap. But occasionally I do end up with these clear plastic trays with lids, and they are really useful for your houseplants. They are like a mini prop box. So I use them a lot. For example, I've just taken a hecton of leaves off one of my primulinas, which, despite my best efforts, still has root mealybugs. So I've just given up on the main plant. I've taken off a load of leaves. I'm going to make sure those are clear of root mealies by using some SB plant invigorator on them. Once I'm sure they're clear, I'm going to start propagating. But for the minute they are in that box, in a big pile, I've put the lid on. The environment in there is damp. They should be fine. So I could stick them in a glass of water, but you end up with a lot of glasses of water and it all gets a bit messy and hard to deal with if you've got a lot of propagations going on at once. So these boxes are really useful for storing cuttings, but also for propping cuttings. So you can line the bottom with some moss or some damp perlite and then stick your cuttings on top. It works really well. If you are doing cacti and succulents, you probably can keep the lid off and just mist them down occasionally. If you've got other plants, keep the lid on, but take the lid off regularly just to check on progress. So this applies to all kinds of containers. I've got some lovely little oval containers that I got from I think they were from Lidl actually, which had these little individual ice creams in them. And again, those have turned into prop boxes, and I'll try to put a video on my social media showing those, because I've been propagating the lovely begonia solimutata, the colour changing begonia, in those little trays, and it's been working really, really well. So Rage of Recycling, have a look, see what works, and this is a great way of making cuttings work for you. More houseplant kit tips coming your way, but now a little soups on of housekeeping. Shout out to new patrons. We've got Susan, Melissa and Marianne, who all did a free trial and then decided to follow up and become legends. And Isabel, who upgraded from Crazy Plant Person to Legend. My Patreon is my monthly crowdfunding platform. You get extras if you are a legend or a super fan, including ad-free editions of every podcast, a bonus podcast every month, and my legendary December mail out. You can also become a free member now. So if you're interested in finding out what goes on Patreon, but you don't have the funds, then you can join as a free member, and that way you can find out what's going on and feel part of the club for £0 or indeed dollars, or your currency of choice, because you're not paying any currency. That's the kind of deal I like. So go and check out the details on my website, janeperrone.com, for more if you're interested in that. I also want to hear from you still for your botany questions. So remember, I've got Derek Haynes, aka the Chocolate Botanist, coming on the show, and I'm still accepting questions for him. So if you've got anything plant related that you want an answer to, why not drop me a line to ontheledgepodcast@gmail.com. Pose your question for Derek and we will do our darndest to get it answered for you in an upcoming episode. Right, back to the thrifty houseplant kit tips. And this one is the paperclip, the humble paperclip. Now, if you have access to a florist, you can probably buy florists' pins. These are the things that florists use to keep plants and flowers in order when they are doing large arrangements. They're really useful for attaching plants onto moss poles, for pinning down propagations and so on. So if you can get your hands on florist pins, great. If you can't, just use a paperclip. Just unfurl your bog standard regular paperclip so that you've got a U shape, and away you go. You can manipulate that in all kinds of ways for all the things I've just described. I think most of us have a bag of these lying around at home. We don't get as much paperwork as we used to, do we? I used to use these to hold together piles of bills and stuff, but obviously that's all online now. So you may have unused paper clips. This is where they come in. You can use them for your plants. When it comes to propagation, oftentimes with plants that are, say, have a little bit of a springy stem, the key is keeping the plant material in contact with the damp soil. This is certainly the case for things like spider plants and string of pearls and string of hearts. The paperclip is your friend. The other thing you can use, and I've used very successfully, is little stones or little coins. So if you've got coppers, as we call them here in the UK, the 1 or 2p coins, you can use those to hold down propagations. But the paperclip works really, really well because it does anchor the plant into the soil. And the reason why this propagation method works so well is because you're mimicking what happens in nature. So Curio Rowleyanus, the string of pearls, in nature, it's not a string, it's a mat. If you've read my book, Legends of the Leaf, you know all about this. It scrambles across rocky, gravelly ground, looking for places to root into. And then the stems, which are very wiry and fragile, but can produce roots all along their stem, will just put some roots down. So by twirling the strings around the top of the pot and then pinning down with a paper clip, you can allow the plant to root really nicely. You'll get a stronger root system and ultimately a bushier plant. Same applies to string of hearts, Ceropegia woodii. Same thing, it's a mat, not a string, in nature anyway. So you can get your paper clips working for you by using them to pin down your plant propagations of this particular species. And the final item on my freebie / very, very cheap houseplant kit list items is the wooden kebab stick / chopstick / knitting needle. All of these work really, really well. If you don't want to buy a moisture meter, you can use this instead. I often talk about putting my finger in pots to check if they're damp, but sometimes this is not possible. The pot's too small. There are too many roots in the pot. If you've got something like a ZZ plant, the Zamioculcas zamifolia, with its enormous potato-like rhizomes, then you'll struggle to get your finger into that pot. Same applies with things like Sansevierias, the snake plants. They're just too chunky in the root area. They have a lot of junk in their trunk, these plants, so you might not be able to get your finger into the substrate. Instead, use one of these wooden items. You need a wooden stick, something like a chopstick, knitting needle, or kebab stick. Stick it in there. It won't work immediately. You need to leave it in there for about half an hour, pull it out and see what the wood looks like. Has it absorbed lots of moisture and is damp and covered in soil, or is it bone dry? If it's bone dry, it's time to water because your plant is dry at root level where the water is needed. So this is why you don't want to just be relying on what's happening at the surface. So again, raid your cupboards, have a look around, and hopefully you'll be able to track down a few chopsticks you've got lying around and make good use of them. And to finish, I've listed lots of free and cheap things, but now a couple of things I would spend money on. The first being a really decent hand lens. You can buy these cheaply on Amazon, which is all very well, but actually the better quality ones will actually last. I bought a couple on Amazon and they just don't have the durability to really stick around for longer than a few months. So if you can, invest in a good quality hand lens and it will serve you really well. The best ones for houseplant use have got an inbuilt LED light. And they work really well because even if the light isn't very good, you'll still get a good result. There are ones made by a company called Kite, Kite, that are good quality. Also Rupa are good quality. And I found if I was going to buy another one, I'm not because I've got quite a few, but if I was going to buy one, I would be having a look at the triplet hand lens that has built-in LEDs. This is a good quality lens. I will put a link up in the show notes to where you can buy that. It's going to set you back about £30 or £40, but one of these should then last you forever. You can replace the batteries for the light and it will just keep on going. Why have a hand lens? Well, if you have a hand lens, you can see what's going on with your plants. You really can see so much more. So you can see the junior forms of various pests, which often are not visible with the naked eye. Red spider mites, even when they're adults, cannot be seen with the naked eye unless you're, I guess, Superman. So you will be able to see what's really going on with the pests on your plants. You can also see amazing details. So you might be able to see very fine trichomes, that means the hairs on the leaves of the plant. You might be able to see different structures you haven't observed before, like extrafloral nectaries, which are little points on the plant that release nectar to attract ants and other beneficial insects. And they're totally separate from flowers. That's why they're extrafloral nectaries. You can spot loads of features on your plant you never knew were there, and it's just a really cool thing to be able to do. But the main point is pest control. It really helps with spotting problems before they become too serious. So do think about getting yourself a decent quality hand lens if you can. And finally, I want to talk about sprayers. Now, this is maybe a bit of a luxury, but if you have a lot of plants like me, I think these sprayers are really good. What I'm talking about is a container which is then attached to a hose with a spray lance on the end, and you can fill it with water and then pressurize it. So you just click the trigger on the lance and it will spray until the pressure is lost, and then you just got to pump it up again. It works really well if you've got a lot of plants and need to do a lot of watering. The only problem is I've had one or two of these and they're not that durable. So it's a struggle to find one that's a good quality one. I would recommend going to like a hardware store and looking there for one that is not super cheap, because the super cheap ones just break really quickly. Either the hose goes, or the connection to the container goes, or the lance goes. It's just not worth it. If you can go for a sprayer that is marked as a professional sprayer, these tend to be a bit more expensive, but they will work out cheaper. Some of them have a backpack function so you can wear them, which is really handy as you move around your plants, or ones which have a shoulder strap as well so you can be mobile while you're watering. You can also use them to apply foliar spray or pesticides. They are a very useful piece of kit. Now, I've been doing a bit of work in Not Another Jungle, Tony LeBritton's shop, and the one he recently bought is the one I'm going to buy, I think. I've been using it in the shop and I think it looks pretty sturdy. It's called the Gloria Prima 5. It actually comes in two sizes. You can get the Prima 3, which is 3 litres, or the Prima 5 with 5 litres. And it's got a metal lance. It's very sturdy. It is made of plastic, but I think this should last a good amount of time. And when I look online, it's got good reviews. This is a German company, I think, and the construction looks pretty solid. The lance on it allows you to switch between a really fine mist if you're doing something where you want something to spray out very fine, to a much stronger stream of water for other tasks that you might want to be doing when you're watering. So I think this might be a good investment, but do look at what's available in your local market, and if you can save up and spend a little bit more on the whole, that means you're going to get a product that will last so much longer. It's the old saw about the more you spend, the better you get when it comes to items like this. This is certainly not a must-have. If you've got less than, I would say, 25, 50 houseplants, it's probably not going to be worth it. But if, like me, you've got plants outside, plants inside, a lot of watering to do and a lot of spraying to do, it could be a really worthwhile investment. And I know I certainly enjoy using it when I was in the shop the other day. It just made the job a real dream. So I'd love to hear from you what is in your houseplant kit, what other free things you've been using for your plants, whether any of these make absolutely no sense to you, and all of your thoughts. Well, that's all for this week's show. I hope it's been as billed, short and sweet for you. Do go and check out the show notes as always at janeperrone.com, and I will see you in a week's time for another fun episode full of all the things you need to know about your plants. Have a great week. Bye. The music you heard in this episode was Roll Jordan Roll by the Joy Drops, The Road We Used to Travel When We Were Kids by Komiku, and Whistle by Benjamin Banger. All tracks are licensed under Creative Commons. Visit the show notes for details.